know how scales of 1 to 10 work, right? 1 is usually bad, no good, no, absolutely not. 10 is usually awesome, perfect, yes, I'll do it, absolutely. Okay, so let's shout out answers, because, it's just more fun that way. So, on these scales of 1 to 10, just take a second, and then we'll shout out our answers. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you like summer? 1, 2, 3. Wow. Okay, got some 1s, got some 10s. Some very adamant 1s at that. Okay, number 2. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you like to go to the zoo? Alright. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you like the game Scrabble? I've heard it depends who you're playing with. Yeah. My sister's like the best, and I've never played Scrabble with her ever. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is life insurance? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, are you a Dodger fan? Okay, so Dodger fans on this side of the room, and no, just kidding. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you like pumpkin pie? We're 1s. So, okay, well that was fun. That was a good warm-up. Let's get down to business. On a scale of 1, okay, now don't shout this out. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your relationship with God to you? You don't have to shout it out, so don't say anything, just think. Alright, last one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your relationship with God to God? Okay, so I hope you answered 10 to this one. See, we definitely should have answered 10 to the other one, but that's kind of like, well, of course you're supposed to answer 10 to how important is my relationship with God to me. I mean, sure, it should be a 10. But how about God? How important is our relationship with God to God? I mean, you'd think it would be important, but on the other hand, why? Because, God created the world. God has all power at God's disposal. God doesn't need you and me. But God keeps talking about wanting a relationship with us. So maybe it is that our relationship with God is important to God. And if it is, well, how important? And if it is a 10 to God, why? And how does God show that our relationship with God is that important to God? Because after all, God existed before us. God can get along just fine without us. So what is it about a relationship with God and us that is so important to God? And if a relationship with God is that important to God, then what does that mean for you and me? What do we do with that? Everybody, I think, has met Abraham before. That's the guy who started in Genesis and kind of started the whole thing of people and families and relationships with God. Abraham was the son of a gentleman who decided that they needed to move from their home to a very different place. So Abraham's dad, his name was Terah, and Terah, when Abraham was about 75 years old, uprooted his whole family and started traveling a long way from home. So when they get halfway on this journey, they stop in a city called Haran, and in that city, Abraham's dad dies. Now, when somebody in their culture passed away, the eldest son would take over kind of leadership of the family. So Abraham takes over leadership of the family 400 miles from home on a journey that he didn't plan, and he's now in charge of his family. So Abraham has to figure out, well, what do I do? I'm now in charge of my family, and I'm 75 years old, and I have to take my family somewhere that supposedly God is leading us. Well, it's at that point that God starts making some promises to Abraham. And here are the first promises that God makes. God says, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. all the families on the earth will be blessed through you." So then Abraham continues on his journey. Unfortunately, Abraham didn't see the results of those promises right away. Because when he arrives finally in his destination, in this land that God was leading him to, there's a famine in the land. So there's not enough food, there's not enough water, and Abraham's thinking, well, this is the place I'm supposed to be. This is like the blessing of God, and he goes into a famine. So they go down to Egypt, they retreat to Egypt, and they ask for help from other people there for quite a while. And then they come back. And, at that point, are they feeling the blessings of God? Are they feeling like, yeah, we are the nation that God is building. This is the family of God. I mean, this is all coming together, isn't it? But not at all feeling that this is the center of God's plan. So God shows up again. And God says this to Abraham. He says, "Look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you." Okay, so more promises. Sounds similar to some of the other promises, but they build on the promises too. Now it's talking about your descendants will be this numerous, and this land is all yours. Go walk around the land. But there's some problems with this. Abraham and Sarah, they didn't have any children, and they couldn't have children. So this is that moment where they actually laugh out loud at God's promises. Like, are you kidding? That can't happen. Well, so then, God says, walk around the land, this is all yours. The problem is they knew that there were other people living in the land, and it was like their land. It was not Abraham and Sarah's and their family's land. So it's not looking like God's promises are doing too well at this point. Well, so then, Abraham's nephew, Lot, is traveling with the family, and Lot had a bad lot in life, didn't he? Thank you. So Lot got into some trouble, and he got mixed up with some people that actually started a war, and Abraham had to rescue Lot. So Abraham risks a lot of his safety and his well-being and his reputation. He goes and rescues Lot and brings him back. And you got to be thinking, if you're Abraham at this point, God, you listed off promises, you did it again, and then you did it again, and I'm still not seeing this. I've got family problems, I've got drought, I've got famine, I've got land that's not my own, I've got all these issues, and I'm just not seeing that these promises that you're making are ever going to come true. How do I rely on this? How do I follow this? So, God shows up again, and God tries to reassure Abraham, and he says, "Do not be afraid, Abram." Later calls him Abraham. "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great." Now again, you got to be thinking, are you sure about that? Because I don't see the evidence, I don't see the proof. I hear the promises over and over again, but I just can't see it. And if I'm Abraham, I got to be wondering, you're making the promises, but I'm just not seeing it. So Abraham actually says to God, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son?" In other words, even if your blessings come true, I don't have anybody to pass them on to fulfill the promises that you've given me for them to actually work. So how's this going to work out? I think this is the very important moment for God, because God's sort of on the spot. God's made the promises, God said this is what is supposed to happen, this is what will happen, and Abraham hasn't seen it yet. It's almost like the moment of, show me the money. I want to see that this is real, and I haven't seen it yet. So this is a critical moment for God. Is he going to show up? Is God going to come through? Is God going to do this? It's also kind of a critical moment for Abraham, though. What's Abraham going to do? He's followed. He's sort of said, okay, I'll go along with this. How far is Abraham willing to go with this? And so what's going to really happen? What's Abraham going to do? It's kind of like, a construction project or some type of a a project where somebody's doing something for you. And some people require, in home renovations or construction projects or anything, other things, some people require all of the payment up front. Others require like half now and then half when the project's done. Others say, well, it's a short project, just pay up on completion, that's all right. We have different ideas of how we're supposed to pay for things like this. But in this case, who's requiring payment up front? I mean, is God requiring payment up front? Is Abraham requiring payment up front? I mean, for Abraham, he's not requiring payment up front yet. But at this kind of a moment, is he in a moment where he's saying, okay, God, I'm not willing to go any farther? Or is he at a point of saying, you know what, I think I can last. I think I can endure it. And okay, I'll keep going with this. These are critical moments for Abraham. These are critical moments for God. And he's kind of on the spot. So what's going to happen? And how important is this relationship between God and Abraham? So, the crazy thing is, guess who goes first? Abraham goes first. God says to Abraham, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. We just read this and heard this. That's how many descendants you will have. And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Now, does Abraham have any more proof at this moment that God is going to do what God has promised? Does he have any more evidence? Can he hold on to anything? No, all he has is more promises. And what does he do? He believes God, and God says, you're righteous because of your faith. So Abraham's the one that goes first and says, I believe you. Even with this, I believe that you're going to do all these things that you said. Now, interesting thing is, in their day, the whole goal of a person in the Old Testament, the whole goal of somebody in Abraham's world was to be righteous before God. In other words, to do things that were right. In other words, do the right things, follow the right ways, act the right ways, think the right thoughts, to do right. So their goal was to be righteous, to do right. And Abraham, all he does is he believes and he trusts God, and God says, okay, you're righteous. So, I mean, God's like connecting the dots here, saying it's not just doing all these right things, it's believing and trusting that God can do these things. And God will say, yes, that's the kind of relationship that God wants. So what Abraham seems to do in going first is Abraham gives faith. He's giving faith to this relationship with God. That's what Abraham is contributing to this relationship with God, even though he doesn't have all this evidence, even though he doesn't have all this proof. Okay, so if Abraham gives faith and he goes first, surely God's got to give something. So what does God give? Well, it's a little strange, but... Oh, actually, sorry, one other thing. If there was a verse in the Old Testament that was the central verse that described what a relationship with God is like, and a verse that everybody would point to for a long, long time about what it means to have a relationship with God, it probably is this very verse in Genesis. That Abraham believed, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. I mean, this was like the hinge point, the center point of so much of what happens, even all the way into the New Testament. People pointed to this verse as saying that's evidence of what a relationship with God is really all about. It's about believing and trusting in God, not just trying to do all the right things. Okay, so what does God do? Well, here's how God describes what God is doing, and we'll try to figure out what God is actually giving here. So, God says to Abraham, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So Abram presented all these things to God, and killed them. Then he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. Okay, that's pretty gross, right? To Abraham, this was not necessarily unusual. This is sort of what they did. This is part of their culture. What God was doing in this setting and in this moment is God was actually establishing a covenant. And literally, to make a covenant with somebody or to make an agreement with somebody it means to cut a covenant. So when somebody would make a covenant, they'd actually cut a covenant. And when they cut a covenant, it meant that they would cut animals as evidence of the covenant. Strange, kind of gross, but yes, this is what they did. It's kind of like we might say that we're cutting a deal with somebody. We're securing a deal. They were securing a covenant, and this is the way in which they did it. So, how does that work? Let's read on. Abram fell into a deep sleep, and after the sun went down and darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abram that day. Okay, I know, kind of gross. We're not going to read any more about dead animals. Don't worry. But there's a point to this. And the point is, what is God doing, and why is he cutting this covenant, and why is it like this? Well, in order to cut a covenant, people would do this, and then they would walk between the halves of these cut animals, almost as a way of saying, I am agreeing to go through this covenant and relationship and agreement, and may it be, if I break this covenant, that I end up like what I'm seeing on both sides of me. So, I mean, it's a real visual reminder of how much am I willing to give toward this covenant and this relationship. So, in Genesis, does Abraham walk between the animals and make the agreement? No. Abraham's asleep. He's up in this vision. God wakes him up to see this. Abraham's not doing it. What walks between the animals? What's this fire pot and this smoking pot? I mean, we've got smoke and fire, which are to them tried and true symbols of God's presence. Whenever they would hear of smoke and fire, they think of God and God's power. It's as if God is walking right down the middle saying, may it be that if I ever break this covenant between me and my people, that I will end up that way. I mean, how much is God willing to give toward a covenant and a relationship with us? I mean, God gives himself. God's given everything to a relationship with us. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? That we didn't do anything to deserve this, but God gives himself to secure a relationship with us. How important is our relationship with God to God? Well, so important that he would give everything to himself. And if there was ever a verse in the Bible that captures that, I mean, surely it's, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave us one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. And why is that the most popular verse that people seem to memorize? And, one of the most popular verses on t-shirts and on apparel and up on screens, and is the subject of so many messages and so many things that people write about and talk about. Because it's the essence of what God did way back then and throughout time. That God gives himself because our relationship with God is that important. So if our relationship with God is that important to God, what do we do with that? I mean, what do we do if God says, I'm willing to give myself for a relationship with you? What do we give? It's not a challenge just to say, okay, if you give this, then, okay, I guess I have to give enough. What does it inspire us to give? What does it lead us to give? What does it give us encouragement to give? What does it give us hope to be able to give others? That's what God hopes for. To so inspire and so love us that we get to share that with others. Let's pray.